Welcome to Perspective and Potential, where we uncover new ways to see the world and tap into the incredible potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Straight, joined by my co host and mother, Gwen Fund. Together, we'll explore ideas, stories, and strategies designed to help you grow, shift your perspective, and embrace a more complete version of yourself. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at perspectiveandpotential.com. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. Today, we're diving into one of the most fundamental skills that shapes every relationship, career move, and personal interaction, and that's communication. Now, communication might sound basic, but in reality, it's a high level skill that, when done well, builds trust, alignment, and clarity. And when it goes wrong, well, it can undo all of those things just as quickly. So let's unpack what it really takes to get communication right and where most of us still have some room to grow. Communication has so many mediums, and it's something that we all do all the time. But most of us aren't doing it with full intentionality. And let's be honest, we often overestimate how clearly we're coming across. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what effective communication actually looks like in everyday relationships, at home, in the workplace, and beyond.
Well, communication definitely can be a very mysterious subject. We do a lot of talking and we can do a lot of listening and still not understand each other. So in reality, effective communication is a lot more involved than just using words and listening. Real communication takes into account a whole plethora of nonverbal cues from the sender, and it requires some degree of emotional intelligence in the receiver. So the real goal is not just sending and receiving, but understanding one another. So I think we can break it down into those three basic elements of communication as we move through this: sending, receiving, and understanding. So many times our communications are really superficial. Hi, how are you? Oh, crazy weather we're having today. Or if the house is on fire, maybe we need to be loud, concise, and quick. Get out, the house is on fire. But with our close and intimate relationships, we need to develop some good communication skills that will nurture and keep our relationships strong. So let's start with being the sender. So we have a need to express something to someone. Our very first task is to be conscious of what in ourself is prompting that need.
And I appreciate how you're highlighting that and you're bringing up the importance of knowing what is prompting your need to communicate, because that's one of the biggest differentiators I see between surface level communication, like you mentioned, and skilled communication. It's that being able to pause, even briefly, just to assess, okay, what's driving my message? Am I trying to be understood or am I just trying to be heard?
Well, many times as we communicate, we're trying to share our ideas or our emotions, or maybe we're trying to connect with someone on a more intimate level. Maybe we're excited to share what we consider joyous news, or maybe we're dreading what we know will be a very hard conversation that really needs to happen. And all of those inner emotions are going to be involved in the words that we express and in the way that we express them. So when I was a child, I can remember my dad telling me, think before you speak. Well, I've come to cherish that advice because taking that moment to get in touch with myself has helped me to choose my words more carefully so that I'm communicating my real thoughts and not just my emotions.
I love that. It's simple, but I don't know how often we're able to always apply that. But that principle of thinking before we speak, it also translates directly into leadership. And whether you're leading at work or whether, even just being a leader in your family, and can be a parent, it can be a sibling. I mean, so many opportunities that we have to lead. But I think that taking even a few seconds to choose your language can dramatically change the outcome of a conversation. So it's not just about being calculated, but it's about being intentional.
Yeah, sometimes we can be so overwhelmed that all we are aware of is our emotions.
Right.
I am so mad. And we can go on a tirade listing all our complaints and blaming everything around us. Or maybe we go stone cold and refuse to say anything or acknowledge anybody around us. But this too is a form of sending out communication. But this kind of communication doesn't solve problems, it
Right.
exacerbates them. The messages received from this type of communication will build walls between the sender and the receiver. So, healthy communication begins with the sender being able to express their true feelings in a controlled and honest way. It requires being humble enough to own our own feelings and to express our desires or opinions without coercion or malice to the receiver, being authentic in our communications as to who we are as a person. So we do this by communicating what we call in the mental health field I statements. I feel this. I experienced that. I want this. I need something. Using these appropriate direct statements that explain how we feel, what we need, or what we want. This type of communication is assertive. It's not aggressive, but it's what we call assertive and very feeling centered. And ideally, we will have also taken the time to think about possible solutions that we can offer to any problem that maybe we need to address. And we have to remember, too, that our opinions are not necessarily facts. And though we have a right to our own opinions, we really don't have the right to force our opinions on other people.
Sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow. Especially when we think we just want change and we want it to be this way. But you mentioned that our inner emotions are always a part of how we communicate. So then, how can someone start identifying which emotion is driving their need to speak, especially when they're in the middle of a strong reaction?
Well, we're going to go right back to the first episode here with taking that moment, right? You take a moment to self soothe, whatever that means. You need to take a breath. You need to just, chant something, say a prayer, and then start to speak slowly. So this gives your thinking brain time to re-engage and to formulate a more authentic response. So by practicing healthy, honest communication, we can save ourselves a lot of heartache. If we're too passive in our communications, we end up feeling lonely and unheard. And if we're too aggressive, we can repel other people and find it difficult to make and keep connection with others. So communication requires a certain etiquette, right? We have to allow others to speak in turn, and we need to be showing respect in our own words and in our own demeanor.
Hmm. I don't know if a lot of people would consider education a confrontational field. I think, in my experience, though, there are often a lot of emotions surrounding people's children. And so there can be some strong emotions or tensions that can lead to confrontation. And so when I'm working with a teacher and we're about to go into a meeting that maybe has some tensions, or we expect that it will be escalated, there are some benefits that I offer as advice that come from allowing the other person to speak first, right? And that is that it gives us the runway to truly refine what we want to say. When we listen first, when we ask questions, right? We gain clarity, context, or we even have that moment for emotional composure. That pause helps us to respond with purpose instead of reacting with pressure. So then I ask myself, okay, why do people talk more than they listen? Is it because we're more concerned, like we said, with getting our point across, or are we genuinely trying to come to a common understanding? And I think in my experience, often, unless you've really practiced, it's the former. And here's why. In my observations, I think it stems from fear. When people are unsure of how they'll be received or afraid their perspective won't hold weight, then they fill the space. They talk more, not because they're confident, but because they're scared. And so they're scared of being misunderstood. They're scared of being dismissed or being vulnerable. But real confidence doesn't come from dominating the conversation. It's about trusting that you can listen first and still be heard when it counts. We can be confident without being combative. We can be clear without being controlling. And it starts when we come from a place of ownership. This is how, like you said, this is how I experienced it. When we do that, we invite conversation and not defensiveness from the other individual.
That's correct. And so then if we want to switch over to the receiver, because that is also a vital component in effective communication. It takes a whole lot more than just hearing words to get their meaning. So when the sender is putting out a message, they're using a whole lot of nonverbal communication as well. Their choice of words, their tone of voice, body stance, and their facial affect, just to name a few. So if the receiver is too distracted by their phones or by something that's going on around them, um, then they might be too busy formulating their own response. Their brain is busy. And they can miss clues that might actually cause them to misinterpret the message. Now, it's also possible that the receiver could be so emotionally dysregulated that they immediately become defensive or aggressive, far beyond what would be beneficial to a healthy exchange of ideas. And this can also build walls between the sender and the receiver. And these walls are what breaks communication down over time.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the biggest breakdown points that I've seen, especially with parenting. Your child might technically hear what's said. I mean, are you even listening to me? Are you staring past me? But I think what I find is that maybe, children who are learning this skill, they are too busy prepping their response, or definitely they're reading into my tone. And there might be some reaction emotionally, as everybody in the conversation is really trying to process the real message. And here's the problem, though: that misalignment can unravel the entire objective for the conversation, and in extreme cases, right, the relationship as well.
So let's go over some really good listening skills that the receiver needs to kind of be aware of. One, of course, is don't interrupt the speaker. Listen closely for the words and the nonverbal clues that are being expressed. Help them feel free to share their entire message with you. Um, Remove distractions that might impact your own attention, right? Our own attention. We want to make sure that we're clued in and get the right message. And we need to keep in touch with our own emotions if the topic is starting to trigger us. And remember, arguing doesn't solve problems, it just makes them bigger. And definitely learn to ask clarifying questions to make sure that you received the correct communication. And then when you respond, do so with your own honest, controlled response. We don't have to agree with every communication that we encounter, but an honest response will save us from further frustrations going forward. Like in marriage and family relations, and maybe even in the workforce, sometimes we just go along just to avoid the confrontation or to end the discussion because it's uncomfortable. But if we do that, then, we are going to continue to feel that frustration and all those other emotions that are associated with it. And the problem is not going to go away. It's just going to fester inside us.
You touched on another important skill. Communication is not just about being intentional, that and taking a pause. That is a huge part of it. But I love what you said about picking up on nonverbal cues, because communication is so much more than the words that we speak, right?
Absolutely. 80% of our communication in a conversation is nonverbal.
That's correct, right? I think I have thrown that statistic out quite often. And here's the thing: if we listen, if we watch people carefully, they'll actually tell us a lot that's going on with their body language. The whole crossed arms, or even our written language. Um, so much is lost in tone, right? We don't understand. And I think everybody has like their own trigger word. For me, if the text come back that I get back from someone says sure, there is nothing more unsure than I am by that word sure. I can't tell if it's a sure or if it's sure. And so there's a lot that goes beyond just the words.
Well, I think anger is a great example. Um, somebody comes at you, they fly at you, and they are just spitting it out, and they are so angry. But we know that anger is a secondary emotion. So that anger is hiding something else, either a fear that they have or a hurt that they're carrying around, or, something else is really triggering that anger. And the only way that we're ever going to figure out, what's causing that is to ask the question, right?
Yeah, and I laugh only because again I go back to my experience within education. And I'm not trying to paint every parent as being highly emotional. Often, though, when you are walking into you know a situation, hey, I get it, I'm a parent too, right? If there's anything that makes me a little fuzzy on my logic, it's when something happens to somebody that I love. And so that's where I try to start. If I have somebody, and I have had parents yell at me, call me names. And if I'm being honest, and even, and I promise this is somewhat objective, but looking at the situation, it's really not me. It's like you said, anger is that secondary emotion. So I've got to then, as the receiver of that highly emotional communication that's coming my way, I have an option and I have an opportunity here to ask those questions so that I can better understand, whoa, what happened way before this moment? If we can start there and ask those questions, kind of peel back the layers, then we can be on our path to resolution. And so, a practical strategy that I like to teach is when you're listening, ask yourself, what's the need behind this message? What what feelings or might be driving this person? If they are coming across as angry, is there a fear that something else is about to happen, or are they feeling offended because of what somebody said to them or how they interpreted communication? But the only way we're going to get there is if we start asking those questions. And sometimes people aren't just stating a fact, they're actually revealing something that matters to them. So if we can pick up on that, then we can respond in ways that build trust instead of the mounting tension.
Yeah, and something you said there, what's behind the need in this message? Isn't that where we started? So a person with good uh, sending skills is going to have already identified the need. But sometimes people don't have those good sending skills yet. And that's why they come across. So it's up to us as the receiver to help them to clarify that need. Because the ultimate goal of communication is being able to understand each other, to be able to express our ideas, hopes, and opinions freely with one another, and to find common ground if possible, or to agree to disagree when we have opposing ideas.
Absolutely. And I think every single person that is involved in any sort of communication is always a sender and a receiver, right? We have to truly learn both of those skills. And I often say that understanding is the currency of effective communication. It's not agreement. It's not getting your way or them getting their way. It's the shared clarity that lets both people move forward. That's successful communication, whether you're aligned or not. Without understanding, though, even the best of intentions will fall flat. So seek first to understand is what I try to live by.
Absolutely. But there are quite a few communication killers out there that we need to really be aware of. Manipulative communications, guilting someone, shaming them, name calling, criticism, preaching, judging, withdrawing, stonewalling, sarcasm, or analyzing what they say without asking those clarifying questions, just making up your own mind what they mean, threatening somebody, ordering them, or blaming them. So, all of these things by design are meant to control another person's thoughts or needs. And they really do not foster honest expression in the other person.
Hmm. I totally agree. And I think those destructive habits that you just mentioned, manipulation, sarcasm, blaming, stonewalling, withdrawal, they're often just shortcuts, right? And to go back to what we talked about earlier, that's a band aid solution and it is going to fall off. It is not actual resolution. So then why do you think that people fall into these habits even when they know that they're not helpful? Is there capacity? Are we able to build the skill to overcome these blockers?
Well, we are. But we need to understand, first of all, that they're mostly from environmental training and mentoring. So if arguing or manipulating each other is the family culture that you came up in, then those are probably the skills that we've already developed and fine tuned. So personality can also play a role. If we are highly competitive or control oriented, we're going to use those things to get our way. But instead, we should be seeking clearer understanding by asking those open ended Socratic questions that ask for clarification or reasons, a further perspective, or maybe there are consequences regarding the shared message. What's going to happen if I don't agree with you, right? So only when we reach understanding are we going to be able to create healthy two-way communication and resolve our differences or create shared visions that allow us to grow and move forward in our lives and our relationships.
Using Socratic questions, I love that you mentioned that. It is a powerful tool because not only do they diffuse tension, but they also create the space that we keep talking about for deeper thinking. When someone feels, and I can't say this enough, but when someone feels like you're genuinely interested in their thought process, the whole tone of the conversation can shift. And so, as we come to a close, let's pinpoint the most crucial points from our conversation today and consider how they apply to our daily lives, because I can't really think of a day that goes by where we aren't communicating in some way, shape, or form. So let's think about this. So much of communication comes down to practicing discipline, the discipline to pause before reacting, the discipline to listen without assuming, the discipline to articulate your thoughts with clarity and respect, and the desire to gain understanding by seeking clarification through genuine question asking. These aren't just innate personality traits, they are skills, which means that anyone can improve them with practice. If today's conversation got you thinking, here's a challenge. Pay close attention to your next 5 interactions. Are you seeking to understand or to be right? Are you listening to connect or to correct? You might be surprised what you learn about your own communication patterns. In our next episode, we're going to explore how our individual personalities play into our relationships. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Your input helps shape the conversation, and it's what makes perspective and potential even more impactful. We are Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives, and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought.
Bon appetit.